He didn't chase headlines, he didn't wear armbands for the cameras, he just stood between two posts for 3 decades and never flinched. 1,390 competitive matches, 125 England caps, 0 red cards, 0 drama, 0 ego. The game changed. Managers came and went, styles shifted, but one thing stayed the same. Peter Shilton. He stood in goal when Maradona punched football in the face. He stood in goal when England wept in Turin. He stood when others knelt to time, to pressure, to fame. He didn't lift the World Cup. He didn't chase the spotlight. He just played. And in doing so, he became the one thing every great team needs, a wall. But when the wall walked away, the world hardly turned. His story faded behind the stories he helped protect. This is not a tale of goals. It's a tale of prevention, of stillness, of discipline, of a man who wore gloves like armor and gave everything to the shirt without ever asking for glory. This is Peter Shilton, the keeper who never asked to be remembered, and yet never forgot what the game demanded of him. Subscribe if you believe that greatness doesn't need drama to leave a legacy. He didn't wait for a moment. He became one. In 1966, while England lifted the World Cup, a 16-year-old lad from Leicester quietly made his debut in goal. No fanfare, no prophecy, just a teenager who already moved like he belonged. His name was Peter Shilton. The club, Leicester City, the pressure, crushing. But Shilton didn't flinch. He just caught everything the world threw at him. He didn't grow into greatness. He arrived with it stitched into his spine. By the time he turned 18, he had replaced England's own Gordon Banks at Leicester, not by politics or promise, but by being too good to ignore. And he stayed there for almost a decade. 348 appearances, countless saves, one unforgettable goal. Yes, the keeper who built his name on stops once scored. A rare moment of madness. A keeper pressing forward in a desperate game. A long clearance, a bounce, a shock, and the ball floated over the other keeper and in. Even then, he did the unthinkable. Quietly. He didn't celebrate. He jogged back and kept saving. Because Peter Shilton wasn't chasing moments. He was building a legacy, one clean sheet, one silent match, one impossible glove save at a time. At Leicester, he laid the foundation: consistency, longevity, restraint. 3 traits the modern game rarely celebrates, but Shilton made them immortal. Some players win titles, others anchor eras. In 1977, Peter Shilton left Leicester and walked into a storm called Brian Clough, a man as wild as football itself, and a team Nottingham Forest with ideas far bigger than their budget. Clough didn't want stars. He wanted soldiers. He didn't need speeches. He needed silence at the back. So he gave the gloves to Shilton, a keeper who didn't shout, but made the pitch feel smaller. In his first season, Shilton conceded just 18 goals. Forest won the first division, and that wasn't even the miracle. What came next? Back-to-back European Cups. 1979, 1980. They weren't expected to win it once, they won it twice. And at the heart of it, not on the posters, not in the headlines, was a man in green whose job was to erase mistakes before they existed. Clean sheet after clean sheet. Reflex saves. Command of the box. You couldn't rattle him. You couldn't rush him. You could only pray he blinked first. But Shilton didn't blink. He made time freeze. In Forest's golden era, when Clough roared from the sideline and the city ground exploded with belief, Shilton just stood. And saved. And stood again. No keeper in England had his presence, and few in Europe had his poise. He didn't punch the air after wins. He didn't kiss the badge. He protected it the way you protect something sacred. At Forest, Peter Shilton didn't just keep goal. He kept history intact. He played for his country more than any man before or since. 125 caps, 20 years in the shirt, 3 World Cups, 10 clean sheets on the world stage. And yet, when names are sung in stadiums, Peter Shilton's is often left in the quiet. He didn't chase the glory, he guarded it. From his England debut in 1970, Shilton stood behind generations of legends from Bobby Moore to Brian Robson, from Keegan to Gascoigne. He watched golden boots rise and fall, watched managers burn out, schemes collapse, dreams go up in penalty smoke. But through it all, he stayed. And saved. Consistent, composed, cold. Not because he lacked fire, but because he knew fire doesn't belong in goal. What belongs is clarity. What belongs is discipline. What belongs is the willingness to be the man who never gets carried away, even when the whole nation is rising or falling on a single touch of the ball. He played in 3 World Cups. He captained England. He stood for a country. And still, the country forgot to stand for him. There was no final farewell, no statue, no national day, just a quiet fade into retirement, as if the shirt he wore for 2 decades had never truly belonged to him. But Shilton never needed the crowd to roar. He needed only one sound: silence. Because when the crowd is silent, the pressure peaks, and that's when the real ones shine. And no one stood in that storm longer than Peter Shilton. It was a quarter-final in Mexico City. The sun beat down like a spotlight. The world watched, and football turned its face. England versus Argentina. A game already heavy with politics, grief, and pride. And then came the moment. A ball floated high. Peter Shilton, as always, rose to meet it with gloves stretched, timing perfect, focus locked. But another man rose too. And he cheated. Diego Maradona's left hand came down like a dagger disguised as joy. The ball dropped into England's net. And in that second, football became theatre. It became myth. It became wrong. Shilton turned to the referee. No scream, no shove, no dive, just a look one of betrayal. The look of a man who knew the rules had been rewritten in front of him. They called it the hand of God. But gods don't need to cheat. Later, Maradona would dance past defenders and score again a goal of genius to balance the theft. But the damage was already done. England lost. And Shilton, the man who had kept his dignity for 20 years, was left with a memory that would burn without healing. He never got revenge, never got justice, never even got a replay. But he did get something else. Silence. He didn't rant, didn't chase headlines. He stood and swallowed it. Because Peter Shilton didn't just defend his goal. He defended the values of the game, even when the game stopped defending him. 4 years after Mexico's betrayal, Peter Shilton was still standing. Older, quieter, but just as certain. Italy, 1990. The world had changed. Gascoigne cried, Lineker matured, and England for once believed. They fought through Egypt, Cameroon, Belgium. They bled in extra time. They rose on the backs of those who had waited too long for glory. And at the back, always at the back, stood Shilton, 40 years old. Gloves still clean. Eyes still fire. He didn't fly through the air like the new breed of keepers. He read the game like scripture. He positioned himself like a prophet, knowing where the danger would come from before it even moved. England reached the semi-final. West Germany. A game carved out of tension. A ball that hit the bar, a flick, a deflection, a goal. But still, hope. It came down to penalties. And as the world watched as eyes locked on Shilton to be the savior he guessed, he dove. But the ball always won. England fell. Shilton fell to his knees. And the nation cried again. There were no villains this time. No hands from heaven. Just a cruel ending. For a man who had waited 2 decades for a perfect goodbye. But maybe that was always his story. Quiet courage without reward. He didn't blame, didn't point, didn't ask for sympathy. He shook hands, walked off, and let history decide what it would do with him. Most players slow down. He just kept showing up. After Forest, after England, after the heartbreak of Turin, Peter Shilton didn't walk away. He walked back onto the pitch. Southampton, 1982 to 1987. 5 more seasons of saves, still in the top flight, still the first name on the team sheet. Derby County, 1987 to 1992. 5 more years, another 175 appearances. At an age where most goalkeepers were coaching, Shilton was still cleaning boots with his performances. And then came the final stretch. Not as a superstar, not as a headline, but as a servant of the game. Plymouth Argyle, Bolton, Coventry, West Ham, Leyton Orient. Each move quieter than the last, but the message was always loud. If I can still stop goals, I'll still play. He didn't chase money, didn't chase nostalgia. He just kept going. In total, 1,390 competitive matches, 1,005 league games, over 30 years in the arena. The numbers don't even feel real, because they're not records, they're monuments. Peter Shilton didn't just play long. He played with purpose, with dignity, and with a professionalism so rare it doesn't sparkle, it anchors. At 47 years old, he finally unstrapped the gloves. No fireworks, no testimonial parades, just a quiet walk off the pitch, and an entire era walking off with him. For 3 decades, Peter Shilton saved everything. Crosses, shots, mistakes. But off the pitch, there was one battle he didn't win for far too long. Gambling. He hid it the way only a disciplined man can, behind structure, behind silence, behind the smile of professionalism. But the weight never left. 45 years. That's how long it followed him. Long after the cheers faded, long after the gloves were folded away, he fought alone with something darker than any opponent he'd faced in goal. And then finally, he did what great men always do. He saved himself. He spoke out, wrote a book. Saved. Not to reclaim fame, but to reclaim others. Because Peter Shilton didn't just overcome it. He transformed it into something useful. A message, a warning, a path. Today, he stands not just as a record holder, but as a recovery advocate, a speaker, a man whose second half mattered just as much as his first. He showed that greatness isn't only about longevity, it's about what you do with your survival. He inspired countless others through his recovery journey, not with slogans or drama, but with the same quiet force he brought to the pitch. Presence, integrity, strength without noise. He never lifted the World Cup, never wore the armband for drama, never dived for cameras, never once raised his voice to tell you how good he was. He just showed up. 1,390 times. 125 for his country. 0 red cards, 0 regrets. He stood still while others made history, and in doing so, became part of it. He was there when England dreamed, when Maradona cheated, when Gascoigne cried, when the world looked to goal and found not a star, but a wall. A wall who aged in silence, fell in silence, rose again in silence, and then stood for others in recovery the same way he stood for his defenders, without asking to be seen, without needing to be thanked. And maybe that's why the game moved on, because Peter Shilton never demanded its memory. He just gave it everything he had until there was nothing left to give. But here, in this story, in this tribute, we choose to remember. Because England owes him that. Because football owes him that. Because not all legends shout, some just stand. If you remember Peter Shilton, not the stats, not the saves, but the man, drop his name in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Let the silence finally speak.